Without a doubt, it looks like the Celtics will win this year's NBA Finals. That 18th banner they've been so desperately chasing is within reach again, and they won't make the same mistake like against the Warriors in 2022. Tatum and the rest of the crew know what's at stake, and they don't have any excuses for this season. The best record in the league, the walk through the playoffs, and one last push is all it takes to grab championship number 18. Let's dive in and see why Mavs' chances are slim to none when it comes to winning this series against Boston. If we take a look at their offense, both teams have plenty to show off. Luka and Kyrie are one of the deadliest duos in the league. But if you go through the Celtics, there's just so much depth and so many options for scoring from anywhere on the floor. You don't end up with 64 wins in the regular season without some serious offensive power. It's not just about having their superstars. Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis were expected to score. But if you're an opponent's coach, what do you do when Horford, Holiday, White, or any other player from their roster catches fire? And the best part of all, they haven't slowed down in the playoffs. Some may say they had an easy road, but they've made it easy because they were so good. When nobody can put up any resistance to you, that's none of your fault. The biggest surprise was how good they played despite missing Kristaps. So now that he's back and already contributing, things aren't looking good for Dallas. Add the fact he probably holds at least some grudge against his former team, and you have a highly motivated 7-footer who can pick you apart from anywhere on the floor. The way he impacts the offense is like no other big man in the league, since he can't be left open anywhere near the three-point line. That creates a big issue for Dallas, because whoever is guarding him must follow him outside the paint, leaving an open lane when Tatum or Brown are the ones cutting through. Good luck defending that. The insane piece of data regarding the Celtics is their three-point shooting. If you didn't know, they've had 8 players making 100+ threes this year, which makes them impossible to guard when they're hot. You can put pressure or use double teams when someone has 1 or 2 good shooters on the floor. But what do you do when everyone can shoot the lights out? If Pick Your Poison was a team, it would be Boston Celtics. Game 1 showed us exactly what everyone expected from a healthy Boston squad. To be the superior team. If you take a look at their stats individually, no one had a historic night. Brown being the leading scorer with 22, but 6 players scored double digits while 2 of them had 20+ on high efficiency. That's what you call offense. Just the trio of Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis had a plus-minus ratio of 44, which is amazing. When you have a team so lit up, the only way to respond is to either tighten up your defense and make stops, or step up your scoring game as well. Unfortunately for them, the Mavs couldn't do any of that. Luka was able to get to his 30 points, but shooting 12 of 26 and 4 from 12 for 3 was probably not what he had in mind. Kyrie went below the radar with just 12 points, making only 6 of his 19 shots. He was cold behind a three-point line, shooting 0 for 5, which isn't his typical game, but it was one Mavs couldn't afford on a stage this big. When your 2 best players have a plus-minus rating of 29, and the opposing team has everything going for them, it's game over. Now, we understand Dallas will probably respond and bounce back from a night like this. But can they do it 4 times? The scariest part of it was Kristaps' post-game interview, where among other things, he said they expected Dallas to have one of their third-quarter runs, which they did, and Boston just played through it without panicking. It's like Kristaps was saying, "We expect them to throw their best game at us, but we know we'll handle it." That level of confidence tells you enough. Boston knows what kind of players they have and what they're capable of doing. On the other hand, Dallas has one of, if not the best individual player in the world right now. But there's a huge question mark whether it could be enough for an upset. Besides SGA and Jokic, Luka has been among the top 3 clutch players in the league this year. But what good is that if the game isn't close at all? Game 1 may or may not be an indicator of what's going to happen by the end of the series, but this is the biggest problem regarding the Mavs' offense. If Luka and Kyrie aren't showing up, there's no one else who can do it on their own. Don't get us wrong. PJ Washington, Lively, and Gafford have been amazing in these playoffs. But their good games always came along with good performances by either Luka or Kyrie. Usually Luka's assists and lobs are their points. If there's no one to throw them, they can't do much. With Kristaps and Horford in the paint, it'll be hard for them to get into the rhythm due to sheer size. They match Dallas's big men quite well, and Horford's experience is invaluable when it comes to reading the space and forcing bad shots. Speaking of bad shots, there were so many situations in Game 1 where both Luka and Kyrie just stood around watching each other do their thing. You may say that's normal. It's their game. But this is the NBA Finals. Boston has done hours of scouting and film watching. You can't rely on that to win you 4 games over the best team in the league. The Celtics did quite the opposite. There were plenty of possessions when Kristaps would start the play in the corner, allowing open lane for either Brown or White, but instead of waiting, he'd circle beyond the arc and wait for the pass, knocking down multiple three-pointers. Also, his size proved to be a huge factor that people didn't take seriously enough, or just have plainly underestimated it. When Luka drove into the paint, he'd usually take the bumpy shot or go for a floater. But with Porzingis in front, he made plenty of forced passes to the side, or just took impossible shots. Boston has also utilized switching on Kristaps, leaving him guarded by Luka, Hardy, and other smaller guys whom he bullied every time he got a mismatch. Another huge mission for the Celtics was carried out by Hauser and Pritchard, who were in charge of making sure Kyrie was covered and followed at all times. Their assignment was simple: make Luka's life hard by denying him any help. And they executed perfectly. Who wasn't covered at all times was whoever Luka was defending. His presence on the other end of the court wasn't as nearly as impactful. When guarding pick and roll, he was too slow with both switches and going under, and too many times he'd stand way too far from his guy, allowing either open shots or Boston to stretch the floor. In the second quarter, he had especially bad play when he missed a semi-open layup against Tatum, only to jog back on defense and go for a double team that was so bad, it ended up leading to Brown's wide-open 3. Speaking of Tatum, he had slightly below-average game, but it was his timing that made all the difference, especially in the third quarter when Boston was having a cold period from beyond the arc, and the Mavs were catching up at one point. Tatum hit an open 3 that was a result of a beautiful ball movement by the Greens, and after that, the game was never in jeopardy for them. What adds another layer of craziness to Game 1 was the fact Kristaps spent only 21 minutes on the floor, so this was only a semi-presentation of what Celtics can look like. Everyone expects Luka and Kyrie to step up and have at least one huge performance, and hopefully for their fans back home in Texas, that happens in Game 2. They'd probably want Game 1 erased from their memories, but unfortunately it won't be erased from the finals record, giving a much-needed confidence booster to Boston. If they want to avoid the same scenario, the Mavs will have to approach the next game with a much different defensive scheme. Luka must play more than just offense. Kyrie must show up against his former team, and both Lively and Gafford must become aware their man can shoot threes, and they have to go all the way up there beyond the arc. If they manage to do some of those things, and the Celtics lose their aim for a game or two, we might have a series worth watching. Otherwise, we're subscribing to watching the same thing, game after game, with only one possible outcome in mind. Speaking of subscribing, make sure you hit the button and stay tuned with our channel for more content like this. It's a pleasure for us to bring you basketball stories as often as we can, so if you support the channel by pressing the subscribe button, you'll help us have more time and resources for more research and better videos. Thank you for staying this far with us, and feel free to share your thoughts on who's going to be this year's NBA champion. See you in the next one. Peace out.